This necklace of islands in the Indian Ocean, under British control for more than 200 years, soon will be sovereign to Mauritius, an agreement between the two governments today ending years of bitter dispute with a US naval base at its heart.
Crucially protects the national security interests of the United Kingdom and our allies, and this has been reached in full agreement with the United States, retaining the crucial base on Diego Garcia. Also closes down a potential route for migrants, and it also has important benefits for Chagosian communities as well.
The Chagos archipelago is made up of around 60 islands and has been under British control since 1814. Britain detached the group of islands from Mauritius before granting Mauritius independence in the 60s, later expelling the Chagos archipelago's population to allow the US to build a base on one of the islands of Diego Garcia, now the only inhabited island. This expulsion of more than 1,000 people has been fought in British courts and described as one of the darkest chapters in British colonial history, with islanders dumped on the dockside, their lawyers said, with no help in Mauritius and the Seychelles. The deal could pave the way for the islanders to return, although not to the largest island of Diego Garcia, where the jointly run UK-US base is located. Both Prime Ministers of the UK and Mauritius said the deal was a seminal moment. But today, a group of Chagosian islanders spoke to the Foreign Office and said they hadn't been consulted.
We want our self-determination. We want to decide what's the future of our island. But that's not been happening. The forced exile started in the 1960s. That was done under the Labour government. And they did it without engaging with the Salvation community. And again, they have done the same thing by doing an agreement with Mauritius without engaging with the Salvation community.
Mauritius has long claimed the Chagos Islands are part of its territory, and a non-binding resolution in the UN General Assembly in 2019 said overwhelmingly that Britain should give up control of the archipelago, so too its top court. In a statement, President Biden says he applauds the historic agreement, which he says affirms Mauritian sovereignty while securing the effective operation of the joint facility on Diego Garcia into the next century. British Foreign Secretary David Lammy said under the agreement, the base, which was used during the Gulf, Iraq and Afghanistan wars, would be secured for 99 years. Some Conservative MPs have argued against the deal.
The airbase, which is jointly UK-US operated, is maintained on a 99-year lease. The other outlying islands go back to Mauritian sovereignty. Now, there are many other countries which would be interested in a permanent base in the Indian Ocean, China being one of them.
And while Chagos Islanders won't be able to return to Diego Garcia, 60 asylum seekers stuck there in limbo still don't know when they can leave it. Rescued at sea by the British Navy and taken to the island in 2021, they're waiting for their claims to be processed. Their fate too is unclear, the treaty and its details still to be signed.
Well, joining me now is Jonathan Powell, the Prime Minister's special envoy for negotiations between the UK and Mauritius over the Chagos Islands. Jonathan Powell, first of all, what's taken so long?
Well, it took a long time under the last government. The previous government decided to start the negotiations under James Cleverly when he was Foreign Secretary. He deserves credit for that because our legal position was in jeopardy. They had 11 rounds and they didn't manage to get to agreement, partly because when David Cameron became Foreign Secretary, he put the whole thing on pause, and that destroyed trust with the Mauritian government, who thought the British government was playing games. So when the new Prime Minister came into office, Keir Starmer met with the Mauritian Prime Minister here in London in July, and they agreed they'd aim for a rapid agreement, much quicker than had happened before. And they had to happen before the Mauritian elections, which are imminent, because then Mauritius goes into a period of purdah and then the period of elections itself, so it wouldn't be done before the end of the year. Right. So we were under a mandate to do this as quickly as we could, and that's what we've done.
Well, you've managed to anger quite a few people. Let's deal with some of the Conservative leadership candidates first. James Cleverly saying it's weak, weak, weak. Tom Tugendhat suggesting that China could establish a military base on one of the Chagos Islands. Are you worried by their criticisms?
Not at all. I actually think it's much more to do with the Tory leadership race than it is to do with the Chagos Islands, about which they haven't shown much interest in the past. I think the problem for James Cleverly is that he started these negotiations, and actually he deserves to be commended for doing that. So he's trying to defend himself from attack by the other candidates by saying that when he doesn't actually even know what's in the agreement. There's a long, detailed treaty, some of which was agreed while he was Foreign Secretary. So I don't take that terribly seriously.
Well,
Tom Tugendhat's criticism is actually terribly ignorant.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. No, I want to hear that.
Yeah, so he's saying China is a threat in this case. The whole point of this agreement is to secure the future of this base, which was under threat because our legal position was in jeopardy. And so we've secured it for 99 years with a renewal in the middle of next century. So it's there for a very, very long time. Anyone who knows anything about Mauritius knows Mauritius is very close indeed to India. And India has just, a short while ago, welcomed this agreement because they see it as a commitment to security in the Indian Ocean. It's also been welcomed by President Biden.
Yeah, but shouldn't you have secured assurances from the Mauritian government about the ownership of those other islands, that they're not going to sell them to China?
When you come to see the treaty, which will be concluded after it is basically finished, but when you see it, when it's actually signed and then ratified, you'll see that it does take care of any of those concerns in the text that we have.
Right, so there are assurances on China getting involved in the treaty.
I'm not going to be specific about exactly what it says, but those worries are certainly laid to rest by this agreement. And bear in mind, this was all negotiated in consultation with the Americans, and if anyone's going to be worried about that, it's them.
OK, but there are a lot of Chagosians who are worried about this because they weren't consulted about this announcement for a start. I wonder why that is. But also they're worried that they're going to lose their identity now.
Well, the Chagosians were very badly treated by the British government in the 1960s and it deserves to be remedied. Now, there are lots of different Chagosian voices. The Chagosians in Mauritius, the Chagosians in the Seychelles and here. And even the ones here have very different views on this subject. And it is right that we should try and remedy the wrong that was done to them, and that's what we're going to try and do. We set up a very substantial fund, which will be administered by the Mauritian government. And we can't tell the Mauritian government to do what is now their territory. So they're going to arrange any resettlement that's possible. And we're also going to have action here to look after the Mauritians, to look after the Chagosians and make sure they can go back for visits. So we're trying to take care of this in every way we can, and they've already been offered a British citizenship, all of them, if they wish to have it. Most of them also have Mauritian citizenship as well. Well,
why weren't they consulted on this announcement? They feel very put out about that.
I think actually during the course of the negotiations, I think people have spoken to them. But obviously, this is a bilateral negotiation between two governments. You can't have them at the table from that point of view. Trying to remedy the wrong of the past is not going to be by sort of, you just have to come to an agreement and then you have to try and work out a way to help them over what's been done in the past.
Do you see this as a possible template for sort of future agreements? I mean, you know, what about the Falklands, for example?
No, I don't actually. I think that the remaining overseas territories that Britain has are actually very sui generis, very separate, very different. You know, the Falklands, for example, have a population. They have the right to for self-determination. So if they don't want to be separated from the United Kingdom, they shouldn't happen to them. Other overseas territories have differences as well. So I don't think this is any precedent. Indeed, our lawyers say there are no precedents.
OK, but righting historical wrongs, you could at least return the Parthenon marbles to Greece. I mean, that seems to be a deal on that, seems to be in the offing.
That would be a separate negotiation, I think.
One you support?
I actually don't have a particularly strong view on it. I actually think it probably will be resolved fairly soon, yes.
Right. Jonathan Powell, thank you very much for joining us.